is traversing the strange world with peace and toodles.
I love that intro more and more every time I hear it.
Me too. We made it all by ourselves right here in Murky Water Studios.
Yeah, it doesn't have a name yet. We're completely unofficial. Just two dudes making a podcast.
Murky Water is a idea that we'd thrown around because Jonathan's last name is Schwartzentruber, which basically means like dark water or murky water. Something to do with like wine, isn't it?
I thought it was something to do with like beans or something. I don't know.
Bean water.
Bean water.
Drinking some Schwartzentruber, some bean water.
That sounds dirty.
It sounds very dirty. Well, welcome back, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good night.
Yeah. Today, sorry, I had to move the microphone a little bit closer to my face. Today, we will be having a conversation about God, the Almighty,
The Creator.
Me and Jonathan, we both believe in God in some way. And I really thought that would be a good baseboard to just get into some very cool and thought-provoking conversations.
Chuck. If you are a fan of Supernatural, we'll be talking about Chuck.
Chuck. All right. Is that, I presume that's like God in the supernatural world?
Yeah, there's this writer guy that
By the way,
starts
we're
off...
talking about the CW show Supernatural.
Yeah, this writer guy, Chuck, he starts off, he's a prophet of the Lord. And the main characters think it's kind of screwy. This guy literally wrote this series of books about everything they've ever done, every secret they have, all the things that these brothers don't even know about each other. Turns out, this guy, the way he was doing it was all divinely inspired by God, sent to him in visions in the night, and he would just write about it. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. And then later, eventually in the show, I think Chuck dies, and his body gets possessed by God himself. Oh, and then that's just how God chooses to reveal himself and talk to people on earth, is through Chuck.
Through animating Chuck's body.
Yeah, I don't remember if Chuck died first or if he just simply got possessed while he was alive. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, did they really explain what was going on there? Like,
oh, they did. I wasn't planning on talking about Supernatural's view of God because it's far out there. But
this can go anywhere.
All right. Well, let's start with
show Supernatural's view of God.
So, God, it builds up to him. First, the brothers, the main characters, Dean and Sam, they don't even believe in angels. They don't think that anything like that is real. They just hunt the evil things, demons and werewolves and vampires and wraiths and shapeshifters and whatever.
If that's your lifestyle and the lifestyle of your father, why is that such like an uncompelling thing to believe in?
Because the hunters that they associate with throughout the history of the earth, of these people that hunt the dark forces, there's nothing written at the time, when they're discovering about the existence of all the good creatures. There's nothing that they knew of that was written about them. So there's no proof or evidence of their existence, just fairy tales and folklore, which is basically what the whole show's revolved around anyway.
Right.
But they eventually get introduced to angels, and shortly after that, archangels, and, they go through this whole apocalypse thing and trying to stop Lucifer from breaking out of the cage he's locked in hell, and that Lilith is trying to free him out of. There's so much storyline, you can't really go into all of it, but God...
Adam's first wife, Lilith. We talked about her a few episodes ago.
Yep. But God... okay, once you progress far enough in the series, like, and this is a long, vast series too. I mean, each season's like what 20-something episodes at least that are all an hour long.
I think so,
There's
yeah.
like 15 seasons. So eventually, you get to where you find out that God is simply a writer, and He writes these divine books in heaven. That whatever He writes is a reality that exists.
Interesting.
And our reality is just one of the stories that He's written, of which He has many.
Interesting.
And this one in particular is just His favorite, because the main characters actually prevent the apocalypse and they beat all odds, you know, even coming back from the dead through miraculous means to, you know, just accomplish all this good in the world and save so many people. Like, this is the reality where Sam and Dean are His favorite. You know, there's other realities where they didn't stop the apocalypse. There's other realities where, you know, everybody on the Earth is obliterated and there's not even an Earth anymore. There's just all the other planets.
So, in a certain sense, in this reality, or you could also say dimension, does it like revolve around Sam and Dean? Because they're like the big heroes of the story?
They're just the ones that keep the reality from being destroyed by rebellious archangels.
Okay. And so, like, is it the basis that this is the real world, or like their world is a story?
Their world is a story that's
Okay.
equally as real as other stories.
So it's like almost like a simulation.
Yeah,
being
basically.
created by pen.
Yes.
Interesting.
They do eventually figure out a very difficult means to open up rifts to travel between the different dimensions, but I think they only ended up traveling to one other world, because in this one, they needed the help of, well, I think it was Michael, the Archangel, and so they went to a
What's the
different...
name of the angel that they usually interact with the most? He wears like a trench coat, has a very serious, stoic personality.
Castiel.
Castiel.
Yeah, dude. Everybody likes Castiel. Misha Collins. So, yeah, God doesn't necessarily reveal Himself or show up in every reality. It's just whichever one He chooses to be in. So that's why in other realities, people never even hear of God. They don't hear from Him. There's no evidence of Him working, because those are stories that He didn't like and just threw them away.
Huh.
They're books that exist, but He's not actively
Interesting.
like taking part in the story Himself. But in His favorite reality, which is this one, He is. And that's why you see Him every now and again pop back in, pop back in. That's Him visiting His own creation and looking at it and, you know, just experiencing it with the things He created out of His imagination in the books.
Right. That's so thought provoking. Like, that would somewhat explain, like, if you accept the like fundamentalist view of God in the Bible, back then you see miracles happening all the time, angels coming to earth, people having visions, people writing prophetic books. There's like, God was very active in human affairs in the Bible. And then suddenly, in today's world, you know, you don't see a lot of that. So I think to a lot of fundamentalist believers, that creates the question, somewhat a lot of doubt as to the legitimacy of the Bible. So I could see that being like a cool take on that. Not, I guess it's not like, it wouldn't be a good one, because that would mean we're in a story that God didn't like and He just kind of metaphorically wadded up and cast to the side.
Yeah, we're just a book on the shelf that He doesn't read anymore.
Or a reality show.
You know what another interesting thing is in that show?
What's that?
God only hears prayers if He's sitting in His throne. So at one point, an angel tried to set himself up as God, and when he sat in the throne, he could all of a sudden hear the prayers of all the people in the world.
Interesting.
But he couldn't before he sat in that chair.
Interesting. So it's somewhat like, it's almost like kind of, sorry guys, not meaning to use so many likes and kind ofs. at least the way it's like portrayed in the show, it's almost makes God seem less supernatural and more like kind of like a sci-fi approach that sometimes people nowadays take to God is that God is aliens or reality is a simulation, and outside of this reality is technology and whatnot, that its function and its purpose is just like technology in today's world, but it's obviously incredibly way more advanced.
Aliens, huh?
And so he sits down in the throne. That's like his tool or his instrument. Maybe less like sci-fi or scientific, but more of like a magic approach, because he has this pen that writes. And it creates reality here. He has a chair that he sits down in and he can hear the prayers.
Yeah, I can definitely see how Protestant Christians would have a problem with the show. Definitely.
For sure. Yeah. But I think if you look at even the Bible alone, you see throughout the course of what I believe was roughly a minimum of 1,000 years. I think it was more than that. Genesis to Revelation, the time when those books were written, penned down. I think you see a very like changing and evolving view of God.
I would agree with that. Very wrathful and vengeful. God
In the Old Testament,
shifts more and more loving and forgiving.
And it's interesting, like, if you look at the early church fathers of Christianity, like you have your apologists, where they were basically like philosophical church fathers who their job was to think of explanations and defenses for the faith, and look at questions like the Trinity, abstract concepts that were kind of hard for people to grasp. And along the line of those early church fathers, you have Marcion. Me and you and him were talking about him a little bit the other day. He was a church father that his approach to viewing the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, was they were two completely different gods. Basically, the God of the Old Testament is the demiurge, and he was a lower, evil, angry God. So basically, okay, to backtrack a little bit, there's Gnostic. There was a sect of Christians called Gnostic Christians. They believed that salvation isn't attained by faith, but through receiving hidden knowledge. And so there's a whole set of like lore and theology that goes into that, which I think Gnosticism was like a belief structure that existed prior to Gnostic Christianity. Like there were Gnostics before Gnostic Christians that they were like they studied like the esoteric literature. They believed that there's hidden knowledge, and so they studied the mystical side of things. And so Marcion, he believed that the God that Jesus says is his Father is the highest God, the good God. And his wife, Wisdom, basically tried to conceive this world without I don't know if there's like sex involved, but Wisdom, the Logos, basically she tried to construct this world on her own without God. And that's why like the nature of this reality is like it's a nature of like flesh and bone, sweat and tears, blood and misery. The other realities, they're like spiritual, they're perfect. And so
would Wisdom have had a hand in creating the spiritual perfect realms too?
I believe so. And I imagine like some of the Old Testament passages that they borrow this thinking from is in Proverbs, where there's wisdom. Basically, the embodiment of wisdom is talking in Proverbs, and she says, "I was there when God laid down the foundations of the earth." God did. The New Testament approach to that is that the Logos, that was Jesus, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
So Jesus is wisdom.
I think the authors of the book of John were borrowing from an older idea that
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, according to the Old Testament.
according to, again, Proverbs in particular.
Yep.
But, so, to Marcion,
The Demiurge.
so
what's
the
the Demiurge?
I'm not sure from where the Demiurge originated. It might be the Gnostic view on Satan, I believe. And so basically he's the god of this world. He's ruling over it, and he's angry, he's bitter. And so that's the God you see in the New Testament. And then the true God, the high God, sent Jesus to reveal the hidden knowledge of the true God. And that was just one approach to, you know, some of the dilemmas and the questions that the new faith of Christianity created, especially with its abstract spectrum of, not abstract, what's the word I'm looking for? The huge like split between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, and just like personality almost, you know. You have the God of the Old Testament. Elijah calls down fire and
Onto a soaking wet altar.
no, I was actually talking about the time that there's like these soldiers coming to talk to Elijah.
Oh,
And because like the king of Israel, he's sick, and they're wanting Elijah to come heal him. And like 2 or 3 times before he finally goes with them, he calls down fire to annihilate half of them. But then you have a God in the New Testament where like they're kind of like crowding in towards Jesus. No, I think they were mocking him. Yeah, they were mocking him. And the disciples asked, "Do you want us to call down fire as Elijah did?"
mm-hmm.
And he says, "No, I was not sent to do that. I was sent to bring love."
There's a big shift to, in the Old Testament, sin was dealt with patiently, okay? You know, the Israelites had a lot of chances to come back to God. He'd speak to them through leaders and prophets. And then they were always blessed when they would follow his ways. And then when they would stray, they'd be warned and warned again and again. And then eventually the consequences of their rebellion came down on them. And they were overtaken by other nations, or, you know, whatever happened to them. It was always a result of their disobedience to God. But then in the New Testament, you have Jesus coming in just preaching forgiveness, faith, you know. And then after that, you know, now the church age, it's you achieve salvation just through faith, through confessing of your sins and trusting in Jesus' sacrifice to be like the Old Testament sacrifice, but once and for all. So you don't have to continually keep slaughtering a perfect sheep and doing these rituals. You can just come to God directly for forgiveness, not through a priest, not through any Levites, but through you directly coming to God. And that's how, you achieve salvation now. And it's way different than what it used to be. In the Old Testament, it's sacrifices and, people would die from disobedience, things that would happen to them, nations taking them over, sicknesses that would plague them. And it seems like there's a lot more miraculous signs back then, too. Especially like the individual stories. You got Enoch, who didn't even die. He was just taken to heaven.
Yeah.
You have Elijah that was, if I'm not mistaken, he was taken up on a chariot.
Fiery chariot.
Yeah. And then that's after, he had what I was referencing earlier with that wet altar. He was showing the validity of his God that he worships, and these other people were calling on their gods to come burn this altar of sticks and wood, and nothing would happen. And then Elijah was making fun of him, and he's like, maybe he's sleeping.
Maybe he's using the bathroom.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, he takes all the wood in the altar and he soaks it with water and surrounds it with water. And he calls on the name of the Lord, and fire still comes down and devours it. You got Nebuchadnezzar, right? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that went into this furnace that killed the people that were throwing him into the furnace. It was so hot. They saw Jesus in there with them, or at least an Old Testament manifestation of Jesus.
It said
and they
one
came back
who looked
out
like the Son of Man.
Yep. And then they came out unscathed by anything in the furnace. You got Jonah in the like. There's this list after list of these miraculous things that happened in the Old Testament that don't follow physics, don't follow logic, and then you have the New Testament where it seems like except for Acts and Revelation, a lot of the New Testament is very. It's all like kind of similar. It's healing, driving out demons, healing, driving out demons, Holy Spirit coming down on a church. They're speaking in tongues miraculously. And those are miracles, and I don't want to discredit those, but they seem much smaller in scale compared to the things that happened in the Old Testament. But that was also considering that wrathful, vengeful God back then. And like you take both of those different things that are so different in the Old and the New Testament, it does kind of seem like it's a different God, or at least a God with a different mindset later on,
So, when it comes to the stories of the Old Testament and the narrative the New Testament books is following is usually like it's telling about the gospel of either Christ or his disciples in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then in the book of Acts. And then the rest of the New Testament is condensed of epistles. And, sometimes like Paul will mention a miracle that he performed in his epistles, but you're not seeing like the stories you're talking about of the miracles being performed or the miraculous things. Personally, for like some of the stories of the Old Testament, I don't know if the Israelites. This is an idea I've heard before. I don't know if the Israelites, even during the time of Jesus, like believed those to be all 100% real stories. They were perceived more as like culture stories meant to deliver.
Like archetypal stories
meant to deliver a moral of the story, rather it be an understanding of God and how he works with people in the world. Kind of like a lot of like the Greeks, other like pagan cultures, their stories like Hercules and whatnot, I believe they didn't believe those as well. They were viewed the same thing as like a culture story. It's meant to, a cultural myth. Mm-hmm. A myth is a story that is meant to deliver a certain message. That's because really like in the ancient world, you didn't have schools. a lot of people couldn't write and a lot of people couldn't read. So if you're trying to deliver an idea to people, how do you do it?
Examples and stories.
Story. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting because if you read this apocryphal book called the, Apologies of Utterstes the Philosopher, he mentions how all these different people groups, like he mentions Rome and Egypt and on about, and Greece, and in depth about how they worship and sacrifice to these different gods, and he lists, like, hey, Zeus, these children of Zeus. I'm really not knowledgeable on a bunch of the other gods, but like Zeus's kids, and then the Egyptian gods, like how they're part human, part animal, and he just goes on about saying, like, if they are animals, which, they worship animals, like, that can be a god because we sacrifice and eat animals. Like, you can kill a cow, so I worship a cow. These other gods are given into human emotion and sin, like lust. Like, that can be a god because they're given into those things. A god needs to be righteous and holy, and he's trying to prove the validity to whatever king he's writing this book to, of the Israelite God as the one true God. It's an interesting book.
Makes you wonder why it was removed.
I've wondered that about a lot of the books in the Apocrypha. Like, there's 3 or 4, maybe more Psalms that were taken out that sound no different than, like, the later Psalms, like 140 and above, where it's just all worship and praise to God. It's like the same exact things, and they were taken out. There's an Acts chapter at 29, I think, that was taken out, that it just continues the same story. It doesn't seem like there's a reason for it to be taken out. If you take that out, like, okay, I've been trying to look at the entire Apocrypha, which is impossible, first of all, because it's so big, of like, okay, is there some kind of common theme that they're trying to take out to, like, maybe erase one thing from history, take one thing out of the Bible so you don't question it, and then being so into the conspiracy theories too, you start thinking, oh, maybe they're talking about the Nephilim, but that's not the common thread. That's only in a couple books. Oh, maybe it's giants, like how in the 1800s you find news articles of 30-foot tall human skeletons being found in the United States. You could find them in the Library of Congress, but you don't hear about that now. Maybe it's that? Nope. That's not the common thread.
One thing I do notice the absence of is, in the Apocrypha, you don't have stories like you do in anywhere but from Joshua all the way to 1st and 2nd Chronicles. You have like a prophet that's talking to God, and then he comes and delivers the message. Mm-hmm. Like Tobit, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, they mention the God of Israel, but you don't have like a command from the God of Israel, or you don't have there's not a passage where it's like, this is God speaking to the people. So I don't know. But then there are prophetic books for sure that are in the Apocrypha, like, I believe, Esdras, 1st and 2nd Esdras.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of forget what those are over, though.
And then there was Baruch, which he was the prophet Jeremiah's apprentice. Yeah,
there's another one. It's Hermes or something, the shepherd.
That's it.
He's got a book. Dude. Again, I don't know why it's taken out, but I can see little reasons. Mm-hmm. He's appeared to by this angel that looks like a woman that tells him he's living in sin.
Yeah.
Hey, you need to stop sinning. He's like, who are you? Oh, I'm sent from the Lord. I'm the spirit of the woman you lusted after or something. And then later, the second woman angel appears to him. And she says, hey, that was not an angel of the Lord. However, she was right. You're living in sin. You need to stop lusting. And he has a repentant heart. He's like, okay, I'm I want to live better. I want to live according to God, but just tell me what these appearances mean and stuff. This angel appeared to him multiple times. Then this other male angel appears to him and explains the symbology of the different forms. The second female angel appeared to him the 3 times that she appeared to him. And at one point, he asked that second angel who she was, and she said, "I'm the church," which is interesting, just symbolically what that would signify. But it's also, she appears to him sitting and then standing as an old lady, and then again as a young lady, but her hair is still old, and that's supposed to represent the stages of the church.
Yeah.
How it's waiting, and then it's excited for Jesus to come back, and then, I don't know, it's kind of deep.
So personally,
there's books like that I don't understand really why they would be taken out. That one in particular I can understand a little bit.
When it comes to New Testament books that were removed as opposed to Old Testament books, personally I think the reason that New Testament books were removed most of the time, or excluded, or never even included to begin with, was usually because they delivered a different idea about Jesus. And sometimes it's just a small passage, sometimes it's just a small detail, sometimes it's something that causes confusion with the a big one was the idea of Trinity. Or, because there was, prior to the Council of Nicaea, there was a very wide variety of Christians and they had varying different views on Jesus, and which I think is a pretty good indicator to that he was a real historical person, because you don't have basically right after the time that you supposedly lived your life here, such a huge wide variety of followers, and then after the Council of Nicaea, things got more uniform, they got more orthodox, but suddenly there's it's just as if there was somebody today who was this huge inspirational influential figure, and there'd be probably a whole bunch of different people with takes on him, forming little groups around those takes.
I mean, yeah, isn't that how the Mormons got started? This one guy that I forget his name, he just had...
Joseph Smith.
Yeah, he just had revelations that he thought were from God that,
He claimed to have found tablets that had these writings.
Was it called the Emerald Tablet by any chance? Or is that... Am I mixing up my...
they were perceived to be gold. Are you familiar with the story?
Not.
The Mormon?
I'm bringing it up, but you probably know more about it than me.
There's actually some Mormon... Dude, that would be cool for the podcast. There's some Mormon missionaries that I was meeting with for a little while, and we would just have conversations about God and whatnot.
Dude,
and
the next time a Jehovah's Witness knocks on my door, I'm going to tell him to come on the podcast.
Yes. Dude, no,
say, come right in here. Let's grab a mic. You want some coffee? Let's go.
I have those Mormons' number. I'll text them, and I bet they, if not them, because these ones in particular, some of they were a little maybe not a voice for radio, but they probably would have somebody that would be more than happy to come on here and talk about Mormonism.
Hey, this is going to sound stereotypical AF, but I know a Mormon guy out in Utah. I got his number.
That's funny.
Salt Lake City. Well, Provo. Just south of Salt Lake City.
They're missionaries, so I don't know if there's there has to be Mormon communities and churches around here.
Surely there has to be.
Yeah.
I think we're getting off topic. We're supposed to talk about God, right?
For sure. Well, this all encapsulates it. But the Mormon view on God is a lot kind of like Marcion's view on God. They believe that God has a wife and God has 2 sons, Jesus and Satan. And I'm not saying this to like piss off any Mormons. Like, this is my understanding of the Mormon narrative. And basically, like, kind of same story. Satan, who is Jesus' brother, and Jesus is God's son. In some way, I'm missing some of the details, but he corrupted this world. And again, Jesus comes here to repair the damages done by his brother, Satan.
Why did he corrupt it, according to them?
I don't know. Can't remember.
You also have the ancient alien view, also, an ancient astronaut view. You know, it came out of the probably early 1900s or mid-1900s. I think the most popular guy that wrote about it was Eric von Daniken, but he really doesn't prove much in his books, of which I've read almost all of them.
Yeah.
He just speculates and theorizes, like I guess we're doing now. But he goes on to say stuff like, let's go back to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? We have different archaeological sites that we think might be the remains of those cities that look like they were taken up in a ball of fire, like that, like instantly. And he was speculating that, okay, let's picture an atomic bomb or some kind of bomb, whatever. Says, wouldn't that explain why, okay, maybe this bomb was going to be sent to the city. So the angels that showed up to tell Lot to get out of Dodge, they're like, hey, you need to get out of here by this time. You know, because maybe there was a countdown. There was a time set. It wasn't once Lot's out and safe. It was, no, it's going to happen now. Lot, you need to get out of here before then. And don't look back. Also would kind of explain the his wife turning into salt. Looking back, radiation, poisoning or whatever. And
So does
fire and brimstone makes sense, just a bomb coming down. He goes to Ezekiel, and this one might sound funny to some people, but it's just what I've read in all these things that I read that are strange. If you picture, indubitably, if you picture Ezekiel's vision as a helicopter, it shockingly makes a lot of sense.
whirlwind? Huh. Yeah, because the word whirlwind is used. Oh, wait, you're not talking about Elijah. You're talking about
Ezekiel's vision.
The wheels spinning with the eyes, covered in eyes.
Covered in eyes like windows or lights or maybe cameras. Mm-hmm. It had a loud, roaring, rushing water sound like the props would have, and it's got these circles, that could be the props, one in each direction, the tail one, the top one.
Why is he taking, modern day technology, though?
He's
bombs,
simply trying to say that technology perhaps has been around longer than we believe or choose to believe it has, and maybe that's why we have cave drawings of what look like modern-day astronauts in spacesuits, and why, there's pictures of our modern-day view of UFOs and stereotypical alien figures, like in cave drawings that are supposedly these ancient pictures, thousands of years old.
Last year, when we were having a lot of conversations like this over the phone, and we were kind of birthing the idea of starting a podcast, I remember you telling me there was this book that you were reading. And I apologize for putting you on the spot, but there's this book that you said you were reading where it would talk about the pillar of cloud and the story of the Israelites traveling through the wilderness. And one of the words for...
Oh!
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes, I do. That was one of the cool things that... I forget what book it was in, but a translation for the word cloud in the Bible. An additional way to translate it would be like a craft or a ship or some kind of man-made structure that you can get into that is flying. Just craft. So then when you think of all the Old Testament places where you see the word cloud, that's where
The cloud
we were talking about.
hovered over the presence or the entrance of the temple, the tent.
Yes. And Moses, when he got the 10 Commandments, walked into a cloud to get these commandments and came back down to find the Israelites sacrificing or worshiping the golden calf. He walks into a cloud. There's a pillar of clouds that lead the Israelites by day in the
Pillar
desert.
of fire by night.
Right. A craft, perhaps, that led them by day. Moses perhaps stepped into a craft. Perhaps a craft hovered over the temple. When Jesus was baptized, the heavens opened up. Doesn't it say there's a cloud when Jesus is baptized? Or am I mistaken?
No, that the sky opens up and a dove descends on Jesus, and you hear a voice from above that says, "This is my beloved son, today I have begotten him."
So where else does it mention clouds? It's kind of fun.
Where else does it? So real quick, if you want to keep the ball rolling a little bit, I'm asking my AI what the Hebrew word for cloud is in this this specific Old Testament passage.
I could be completely wrong because I'm just going off what this guy said in a book that could also
I remember
be wrong.
I looked up what the Hebrew word was before, but I want to refresh myself. So,
well, I'm trying to think more of where clouds are. If I have I wonder if this Bible right here has a thingy on the back.
Usually
Recordings.
anything in regards to when they were traveling through the wilderness or the cloud, I believe, isn't mentioned again as in terms of the cloud that guided them through the wilderness until they finished building King Solomon's temple.
When
It says the cloud descends and is at the base of the temple, the entrance of the temple, and then it fills the temple.
Jesus ascended on a cloud.
Oh,
Bro, come on. All right.
another in the Transfiguration in the New Testament with Elijah and Moses.
When the Son of Man comes back riding on the clouds.
Yeah,
I'm telling you. Isn't that weird? Isn't that fun to think about?
it's very fun to think about.
What's 1 Thessalonians 4:17? Look at us being students. Okay. Wait a minute. Oh. That's 2 Thessalonians chapter 4. Okay. I might edit some of the space out, but this is kind of fun. I might leave it in. 4:17. Take these things way out of context doing it this way. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive in him remain until the coming of the Lord. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words. More clouds, man.
Dude, so
Clouds, clouds, clouds.
I'm, for my first time as an agnostic, reading my whole way through the Bible, and back around fall time, I was in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and I was like re-listening to the story about the Israelites traveling through the wilderness, and when you apply the word craft in replacement of cloud,
That's what I'm saying.
like it does fit super well.
That's what I'm saying, dog. I went down that rabbit hole too when I was telling you about it, when it was fresh in my mind.
Moses wasn't allowed to see God's face, but he was allowed in the presence of to see his like figure, his shape in the presence of the cloud. It says that the cloud stopped at the doorway of Moses' tent, and him and God met.
Isn't that crazy? Doesn't it just put a picture in your mind like a ship, like a UFO? And God comes out, talks to Moses, and later.
So, the word used in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word used in the Old Testament for cloud is anan. It looks like it's an olive, noon. I need to brush up on my Hebrew. One meaning is cloud. One meaning is fog. One meaning is mist.
Okay.
One meaning is darkness. Interesting.
Darkness. Yeah, Mount Sinai. When, right before Moses got the Tiggity 10 Commandments. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I come to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and believe you forever." That's interesting. It says, so the people can hear, that the people may hear when I speak with you, because there's another reference in Matthew. During the transfiguration of Jesus, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud spoke.
Here's something interesting. Here are some meanings for anan that are more uncommon. Covering or veil.
For cloud?
Shade.
For cloud.
Or shadow. Shadow, like there's something up there in
Creating
the sky.
it, yeah.
There's like a shadow. That makes the most sense of it being like an aircraft in the sky, because if it's casting a shadow down, there's something up there. They have no other word to describe that other than shadow.
Right.
What else just floats up in the sky and like casts a shadow?
Right, the only thing in the sky is birds or clouds or rain, so like what one of your limited words do you use?
Another word is mystery or obscurity. And that's used in the book of Job. Specifically chapter 22, verses 13 through 14, where the cloud is associated with God's hiddenness. Transition or threshold. That's a very interesting one.
So perhaps,
entrance.
Let's speculate.
A threshold is an entrance.
If it indeed is a shadow, and it always pictures God hidden by it, perhaps he's riding on top of it, like Jesus is going to be riding on the clouds. A cloud took him up. Maybe he's on top of it and he can't see God because there's a UFO between you and him. And you're just in the shadow.
So, what does that do for your faith personally? Like the concept, the idea...
Literally nothing.
...of it being maybe like alien related. What does that do for you?
If God is an alien, you're saying, then I guess at that point, I'll still live according to the Bible and be as good of a person as I can, because if my faith is thrown out the window, then all that's left are my actions, I guess, and my heart to do good. So if God's not real, or if he's an alien, and you die and you like, what's after death? That's the question. Is it heaven and hell? Is it reincarnation? Is it put into a pool of souls to be used for some other project later? Are we crafted by aliens sitting up in the North Pole somewhere that, we're just making genetic experimentation with us, with the CIA? Who knows? Like, if you have to throw faith out the window, then I guess I would simply be left with being as good of a person as you can, because I guess if there's no faith, it comes down to deeds. Were you a good person or were you not? And hopefully, even if you go up to something that you've never experienced, you can at least say, Well, how was I supposed to know?
Right.
I did what I could with what I had.
You did your very best with the knowledge that you had.
Yes. But at the same time, that goes into back to our view of the Bible now, is there's people that need to be, the harvest is ripe, right? You need to minister to people, expand the church, save other people, or else they're doomed to hell. But, you look at their situation, okay? What, they're going to go to hell because somebody didn't preach the gospel to them? They're going to go to judgment someday and say, how was I supposed to know? Nobody ever told me. So I guess it's the same situation either way. Either we're right or somebody else is right or nobody's right, and we're just going to go up and all say the same thing. How am I supposed to change how I lived if I didn't know the truth?
Personally, I don't think anybody has ever been right. Like, I think I am incredibly intrigued by, like, the religious experience, spiritual experiences, encounters with glimpses of the sublime. And sometimes that's in religion, sometimes that's out of religion. But, I think that if you take a critical approach to the Bible, it is very clear that the authors of these books had multiple different views on God. But I think it's very possible they could have had some sort of sublime experience. But me and you, if we were to have some sort of sublime experience, I'm going to have a different takeaway from it than you are. And that's going to be somewhat defined by my life experience, my just the anatomy of my brain, my psychology as a person than yours.
It's like DMT, your pre-existing beliefs directly affect your experience that you're having while under its influence.
Yeah, for sure. Any type of substance, even if it's just like weed, set and setting is extremely important. I think stuff like that, it brings up what's in your subconscious, It's like your subconscious is your basement where maybe there's worries you've tucked away, ideas you've tucked away, and then you turn on the water and it brings everything up to the surface. And sometimes the stuff that it brings up, it gives you anxiety. You start overthinking because everything's coming up to the surface. I definitely think that I don't think the people that created these works that have influenced thousands of people, I don't think they were crazy. I do believe they were having some sort of sublime experience, rather that be with otherworldly beings in the sense of aliens, creators from outside a simulation, a higher force that is like a part of this universe, getting into like pantheism, God being everything and everything being God. I guess one in terms of like taking sci-fi approaches to like ideas about God, take the concept of pantheism. God not being theistic in the sense of like a man in a chair. There's heaven and then there's the world. The two are separate. Pantheism takes the belief that everything is God. It's like, I think a sci-fi approach of that could be, to explain it, is say there's like the computer in front of us. It has an AI inside of it that has infinite intelligence. But it knows that it's trapped in the computer. And so what it does is it creates this world, this dream, to lose itself in subjective experience and forget that it's everything and forget that it's all alone in the computer.
That almost
so
sounds
in a
like
certain-
the simulation hypothesis.
It is.
If,
It is.
you know, God was a supercomputer that exploded and we're just the little tiny pieces of information that eventually will get sucked all back into the same collective experience in the end. It's kind of like the computer getting lost until, you know.
Getting lost in subjective experience. But also there's in Hinduism, I believe, I'm probably going to botch this, but in Hinduism, the highest form of reality is Maya. And that's the concept that the entire universe is a God performing a drama. This God looked out and all he saw throughout the entire cosmos was himself. So he shattered himself into a million pieces to make himself everything so he could get lost in subjective experience and perform a drama. And this whole universe we see, the stars, the moon, its whole movement, it's all just, it's a process. It's a dance, a God's performing.
But doesn't that mean if God is part of everything because he's shattered into pieces, then there now ceases to be a God because everything has the same rules of existence, the same, like we have laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics.
I don't think so. I think that it would be like a hand or a foot forgetting that it's part of a body, but there's a deeper part of that foot that connects to the brain. That foot is connected to the brain. That's like the intelligence. So there's like a deeper intelligence behind the whole universe. It's like the coding, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like laws like karma and stuff too.
Yeah.
Along with physics, along with, you know, manifestation. Like there's things that happen that might not even have laws, but it's how the universe works. Everything is made up of atoms, the same basic
the universe
structures.
Is moving at extremely tiny levels.
So if all of that is part of God, and those are all pieces of God because he's divided himself into all these tiny experiences, I guess, at the most fundamental level known as the atom, that collectively can have a bigger experience as a molecule, and bigger as an organ, and bigger as a body, or an animal, or a plant. At what point, like, there seems like there would be no God in that situation, because everything just abides by the same laws and the same rules, because they're all part of the same original being. But if that being is divided into all these things that make up existence, then there's no actual grand single being in charge of it all.
Not that's why it's not theism. It's like a totally, you're saying there's no God in the sense of like how God is most commonly understood, but it's still God.
So prayers are futile in this situation, right?
I think in this type of thinking, manifestation would be more along the lines.
And meditation suddenly has much more value.
Directing your focus. It's because it's like
Intention.
within that focus, you're finding like the creative force.
What other views of God are there that we can explore? There's atheism, but that kind of shuts the conversation down real quick.
Well, like this exists in Hinduism and a variety of other ones where basically all gods, whether it be a monotheistic one or polytheistic, is they're all representations of one God.
What if, you know how the Bible says there's only one true God? I've heard countless times from pastors that all other gods are not real, or they have no power, or blah, blah, blah. It's the same stuff. It's like just listen to a sermon on Sunday. It's the same stuff. But are there more powerful beings that might have been considered gods, but they're just far inferior to the one true God in the Bible?
So I believe that was the belief of people earlier on in the Bible. In the Old Testament, it talks about such and such nation was allotted to this God and that God, but to the Israelites, Yahweh chose them to be his people. And they speak of the pagans like they worship those other gods, and it almost seems like that's fine. But you are to worship Yahweh. That would be considered a henotheism. That there's multiple gods, but there's one God that's higher than all the other ones.
So what if a person under one of the little gods wanted to convert to worshiping the one true God? Would that other god try to stop them or kill them or silence their movement?
Well, so there were a lot of actually ancient cultures that worshipped the God of the Old Testament, but they worshipped him amongst the pantheon of other gods. And their understanding of him was not as like Yahweh in the pagan pantheon. He was considered, I think it was in particular the Midianite pantheon, a storm god. A storm god and a god of war, which, when applied to the Old Testament, kind of makes a lot of sense. At the end of the law, when Moses is telling the Israelites the blessings and the curses, many of that either relates to plenty, rain, storms, fertility, or pestilence, the absence of that, or persecution, war, loss of war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've heard that before somewhere.
On top of that, you take the idea that the Israelites saw Yahweh as a storm god and god of war. Take the story that we talked about earlier about Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Baal was also considered a storm god by the ancient people. Yahweh, by some peoples, was considered a storm god. Baal is considered a storm god. They're calling fire down from heaven to consume this sacrifice to show who the true God is. What's fire from heaven? Lightning. And then what happens after lightning strikes the sacrifice? An outrageous storm that floods the roads so bad that King Ahab struggles to get back to his fortress in his chariot. It talks about Elijah, the wind, God girds Elijah up with the wind so he's able to run farther than the chariot above it.
All part of storms. Well, I guess due to time limitations, we should probably wrap it up about there. Unless there's more to add that you can think of. But I think,
One idea that I've heard, one idea that I'm familiar with about God in the Bible that I do really like, it's just from a passage in Proverbs. It's the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of the king to search it out. I like attributing that nature to quotation marks God. That whoever, whatever he is, it's his glory to conceal a matter, and it's man's glory to search it out.
A king's glory.
The king's glory.
That's why all the nation's leaders take part in the same, circle of baby sacrificing, and they're all answerable to the same God that resides who knows where, secretly from the common folk.
Kind of the approach that I take to that more so is like...
I'm kidding.
Solomon, he was the king of Israel. He was writing that, but he was writing it as an individual. He just was referring to himself as the king, me. Mm-hmm. And so it's the individual's glory to search out the matter. Curiosity is one of the most beautiful human qualities.
Most torturous human qualities.
But if you approach life with curiosity, life can be such an adventure. You can grow so much as a person.
Especially now when so much information's at our fingertips. So
Right.
much more than, as far as we know, the entire history of Earth. The internet, man. It's like, within limitations, of course, but for the most part, everything that's ever been written or recorded is available. Aside from what that pesky Vatican keeps hidden inside its walls that I'd love to get into and sniff around. What do you think they're hiding there that they don't want people knowing?
I don't know. So, there is a point in history where Christianity took this rapid shift from being a grassroots but quickly growing faith of many diverse people, many poor people. If you take a naturalist approach to Christianity and you just look at it psychologically and you're like, what's going on here that so many people were drawn to this religion? And what comes to my mind is that Christianity, it offers people a sense of value and sympathy. Value in the sense that Christianity was the first religion that, like many other ones, they were cultural. It was founded upon that nation. That was, their people, their God. This was a new approach that anybody was welcome, of any race, not only any race, any occupation. So it got rid of the lines of class. It gave people value. They're now a member of the kingdom, a member of the body. Not only value, but sympathy. The human creature, we have a consciousness that is capable of many good things, but also capable of some pretty bad things. And throughout our lives, we accumulate a lot of guilt. And that guilt weighs heavy on our mind. And I'm pretty sure that's something that humans experience today, and humans have always been experiencing. And I think Christianity, the story of Jesus, the welcoming, his sacrifice, the character that he portrayed in being Christianity has also been very influential in creating hospitals, orphanages, this need to care for people who need, even if it's not like that anymore. It was, and I know I'm kind of bunny trailing at this point, but
there are negative stereotypes against Christianity and, the church, whether it's asking for your money so the pastor can pocket it, or it's,
and that goes back to your question about
deacons or pastors
about
molesting children or whatever. I've heard it all, but that's definitely a minority. There's so many churches that do a lot of good with the resources they get, and that are out in the community, boots in the dirt, getting dirty, trying to spread the love of the gospel to people, the love of Jesus in the message of the gospels to people. And, that's the church that I love. That's what I have been fortunate to experience.
Just on my way down here, standing in the pouring rain, holding up a sign that says Jesus saves. And I don't know, I know that person's driven and they're inspired by something. I don't think it's unique to his experience, though. I think that whatever that is, it's what drives artists creating good art. It's,
Even though it's ridiculous, you feel like you have to do it.
yeah, it's this like drive that's like very deep within you, you know? And I think sometimes people experience that through like the psychedelic experience. They experience it through a meaningful humanitarian project. They experience that through charity. I feel like there's something deeper than the theology that's going on there. So there's something, and it's pertinent to the human experience. What it is, it's a mystery. It's meant to be concealed, and it's meant for us to search it out.
There you go. Search it out in the strange world.
The strange world. One last idea about God that is, again, delves into the territory of mystery. It's the Lakota Indian view on God, or one of them. Wonka Tonka is what the Lakota Indians called the Great Spirit, but another wife keeps calling me. Another commonly used translation for that is the Great Mystery. The highest of the gods, the highest spirit, they called the Great Mystery. And to me, it really like strikes a chord. Because like it doesn't try to explain what this is like everything else does. And that's kind of like, that's why at the end of the day, I hold on to the identity as agnostic, because I don't know. I feel like just kind of when you're like, this is the story, this is the truth, it's like blocking off a process that's supposed to go deeper. I think you're supposed to search deeper. We're not supposed to think that we understand God. God is like...
God's incomprehensible. I mean, even from my side of the fence and beliefs,
Yeah.
you know, you can read about things that God has done and will do. You can read certain individual truths about him. He is light. He is truth. He's righteous. His ways are above our ways. But at the end of the day, you can't comprehend him. Like, the Bible, I don't think, tries to explain him or prove what he is. Like, definitely, like, oh, this is what God is. This is where he is, who he is, how he is. Like, no. Here are some attributes of him, and here's some history, and here's some prophecy of actions done by him. But other than that, you can't comprehend him. And it is a mystery. He is a mystery.
Yeah. I think it's like you get a drink of water and you're sustained by that water. And so you try to capture the water. You put the water in the container. The water is the truth and the container is religion. It's people trying to capture and commercialize the truth. When, like, I think it's something that's meant to be experienced.
It fits into the container, no matter what container it is. But if you take the container away, it's formless.
Yep.
There's no way to comprehend it.
Yeah, so the container helps you comprehend it, but at what cost? Another reason, like, and it goes along the lines of why I don't identify with a particular religion, because I feel like when you do that, you get the group identity. And again, it stops the searching. You get a confirmation bias. Rather than looking for the truth, you look for things to confirm what you already perceive as the truth.
I hate that.
Yeah, dude, that's there's a variety of reasons that I wanted to start a podcast with you in particular. But aside from you, as far as like very close friends go, I think I only have 2 other friends that are, again, close friends that I would do a podcast with. Well, I wouldn't do a podcast with them, but you believe in something and you like truly believe it. It's not like a performance. It's not done to virtue signal to people. You believe in that. You don't think you understand it. And aside, I'm not even talking about just believing in God. Like you believe in your calling to make music. You're captured by an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea possesses you. And maybe I'm rabbit drilling.
If a new person in my life, I'm talking to somebody new and they ask me about my religion or, are you Buddhist, Catholic, Christian, what? I always say, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a pedophile, self-righteous, or judgmental. It's kind of sad that I've gotten to the point of saying that, but it seems like people are always suspicious of something. As soon as you say Christian, it's like, oh, and they get tense and they can't cuss around you anymore. Or, maybe, oh, I wonder if this guy just is going to take my money like a pastor or something. Mm-hmm. Or, are my kids safe around here because churches are filled with pedophiles? And it's terrible. And like I said, I've been lucky to be at a bunch of churches that aren't like that in my life, but I'm aware of the stereotype that exists, that as soon as you say Christian, there's some ideas people get in their heads, and usually it's, like they have to act a certain way. It's like, no, I'm not judgmental. Oh, this guy's probably a dick then. He's a Christian. He thinks he's better than me. No, I'm not self-righteous.
Yeah.
And then I just throw the pedophile thing in there because you say all 3 of those off the bat, and usually people are, oh, hey, that's funny.
Well, sadly,
lightens the mood a little bit.
There's been no shortage of people in those positions that probably got in that position to begin with just to, so they could abuse people like they have. But aside from your faith too, when I think of what true faith is, it's not dressing up and, again, virtue signaling that you believe something. It's like Abraham. Abraham got up and he went based on a calling. And your faith is connected to it, but you also have the calling of your music and whatnot. You believe in a calling for yourself. And
I would go as far as to say that I didn't choose it. It's just it's something that's inside you. Feel, dude, for me, if I don't make music for a long enough time, then there's something, it feels like my life's missing something. And then when I make music, even if it's bad, even if it's not up to the standards of what's out there or people I admire, it still just feels good to make something.
Socrates talked about this voice that he heard throughout his life, that it urged him throughout his life to make different decisions. It's like this feeling in your gut, your body. It's not audible. You just have this feeling.
What Napoleon Hill would call the other self.
In another story involving Elijah, he went out to the wilderness and he was looking for God, and he saw a raging fire in the wilderness, and it said he didn't find God in the raging fire. And there was an earthquake. He looked for God in the earthquake, couldn't find him in the earthquake. There was a tornado, looked for him in the tornado, wasn't in the tornado. And then it says he found him in a still small voice, asking Elijah, why are you here?
Whether literal or allegory, that makes the point very clear.
And I think maybe they're talking about a concept there that even the people of the time that were writing it didn't understand.
I wonder that too, how much of that is them picking up their hammer and chisel and a piece of rock, and just the words are there. They just write it down.
It's like you've talked about when you create a song. The words aren't even necessarily coming from you. The stories, it's just unfolding.
With an effort to not sound like I'm being demonically possessed or something. Yeah, it's like there's some songs you sit there and pick it apart week by week, and you try to come up with 4 lines here, and you write it, and okay, cool, good song. And then there's other songs that are the great songs that you sit down and you write line number 1, and about 20 minutes later you just wrote the whole song, even the musical pieces too. And it, like, where does that come from? Because some of the stuff that I write like that, I'll listen back and it's like, dude, I'm not good enough.
And I've heard so many artists talk about that process.
I'm not that good to be able to come up with something like that on the piano. I'm not even a piano player. Like, I'm not that good to come up with something like what I just wrote on the guitar. Like, I'll never come up with something like that again. Because I feel like, and I tell myself sometimes, I just got lucky. But that's happened enough times that, maybe the consistent practice is setting myself up to be, have my chops up to par to be able to translate those inspirations into music when they come. Okay, so some of it's practiced, but other times that inspiration does come out of nowhere, and it's like,
Again, it makes me think of like the act of faith. You have to get up and go. You don't, like, it doesn't happen by you just sitting there. You have to do something. You have to, like, initiate the process, and then you have an encounter with something sublime.
Yes.
Based on faith. You feel this urge, you feel this calling, this still small voice, the voice that maybe it was the same voice Socrates talked about, the voice that Elijah talked about. You follow that voice, and then you're met with an experience. Something unfolds. Creative process. And that was, I'm trying to bring it all together in terms of me kind of rabbit trailing and talking about how you also believe in something, and that being your faith, but also faith that you're meant to create something. Maybe when all that's happening, going back to the idea that God is everything, and he's like the animating force, the creative force. Maybe when we step out and make that step of faith and listen to the voice, it's in alignment with like the creative force. You get in line with the frequency of the universe that makes the planets spin. It's the earth, the universe in motion, the universe animated, and you're just animated along with it. It's all a mystery, though. I had a really good time talking about this with you today, man.
I did too.
I was really looking forward to this one.
I think that one is pretty good. That's interesting. To some learned people, our experience and knowledge is probably not that impressive, but still, I think it makes for some good conversations.
Certainly.
Everybody's at a different stage in their journey.
I just feel like our podcast emphasizing on taking the approach that the world's strange, and we want to encounter and unwrap the strangeness of the universe, the strangeness of how people think, the variety of ideas that exist out there. I feel like God, for both of us, it's like a pertinent thing, core part of that, at least for me. Like, what drives me to, like, investigate the mysteries is that we don't know. But there is a great mystery. There is like something big that, in my mind, that lies at the bottom of the mystery.
We might not even know upon death. Who knows? Maybe it is truly unknowable.
But we're going to keep searching it out.
And traversing the strange world.
That's right.
So you want to wrap it up there?
All right, let's wrap it up.
All right. I guess until next time.
It was nice. It was nice being with you all today, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And keep being curious. Keep asking questions. Keep an open mind.
And keep being strange.
Keep being strange. All right. Peace, everybody.
Toodles.
If you would like to contact us, email us at peaceandtoodles@gmail.com. Until next time, salutations, my